is not sustainable. It's not proven. On the contrary, you find many people who become very old and very happy by living massively unbalanced lives. The question of whether this works or not is not about balance. It's about sustainability. And you can be focused on your business because you find it fascinating. You want to build something super creative, super, I don't know, whatever. You just love your career, or maybe you are a professor, or you are an author. You do whatever you want. And you find it fascinating and you want to do it. The question is to find a lifestyle you can sustain. And it's not that you have to spend 8 hours in your business and 8 hours in your family and 8 hours sleeping. This is not how human life works. The question is to find a lifestyle you can sustain. And as long as you have a reasonably good diet and reasonably active lifestyle, you do not necessarily need to do. And in the book, in Disrupted, I show stories of people doing very well and becoming very old and very happy. When you look at their life, we're extremely unbalanced. So this balance is something
John?
we tell ourselves, but it has no reality.
Okay, John, I got to interrupt you. I need you to hang up and call back because the communication connection has gotten really bad where you're breaking up really bad.
Okay, I called in a second.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. So he'll be back in a second. He is calling from Europe. He's wrote a lot of books. You know, I think what he's saying, it does make sense. What do you guys think? Okay, I think he's back. He's one of the fastest dialing. Okay, let's see what happens here. So far, it's looking good on here. Okay, John, you're back on Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark. This is Gary. Okay, I don't hear you. No, we just dropped out again. Oh, wow, that sometimes happens. I mean, okay, let's see what happens here. Okay, are you there, John?
Yes, I'm here. So I was just saying that whatever you do, you need to keep some margins. Don't go 100% on one direction. Keep your life relatively sustainable, but it doesn't mean you have to be balanced. The idea of balance is a myth. I would say it's propaganda because it doesn't have any scientific grounding. It doesn't have any logical. It sounds good. And human beings, we have this tendency to find proportion in everything. We want to have everything organized that it looks proportional. But in real life, human beings, we are driven by passions. We are driven by interest. And as long as it is sustainable, you should not worry too much about balance.
Okay, that does make logical sense. I just know even from my own past lives that, or past life, some of the different jobs I had in and out of radio that it did affect my relationship with my wife. And when it reflected, caused a problem between me and my wife, then it caused a problem with what I was doing because then I didn't put the energy in what I was doing. So, I mean, it did have a little bit, at least in my case, a ripple effect.
Yeah, it can happen. But the question is about priorities. And if someone finds his career fascinating, I think, and say, okay, I want to give it all because I want to be a great performer, because there are some careers that are essentially very disruptive. If you have, you are, for instance, you're doing music or you're performing, you will have to travel because the business is that people nowadays, they make 99% of their income by performing, and the records, they don't sell. You don't make a lot of money by selling recordings. And this is the nature of the business. So if you want to do it, you just have to do it. The problem is the messages we get. If you look at the latest movie about an artist, this movie about Freddie Mercury, Queen, the Rhapsodian, the Bohemian Rhapsody that's is in the theaters already for a few months, you see this story of an artist, lonely, isolated, but this is not the way it has to be. You just have to build your life in a way that works. And there are many artists and many people who work very hard, and they still have a relationship. But I acknowledge it is challenging, But I don't think this is an argument to say I have to be perfectly balanced, because this becomes sometimes an obsession that people say, I'm working too hard. But okay, just design your life in a way that works. The important thing is that this is sustainable.
Yeah, that does make logical sense. Now, can you give us a couple more examples out of your book? And again, why don't you tell the listeners the name of the book again?
Yeah, the title of the book is Undisrupted, How Highly Effective People Deal with Disruptions. One of the ideas that I present in the book that I think is absolutely not self-evident is what I call the myth of the inception point. And this is the logic justification we tend to give ourselves when people become very sick, or they go bankrupt, or they face unemployment. We tend to drive the whole story to a single point, what I call the inception point. I say, oh, everything was going well until this happened to me. Or I was just doing well and then I got a heart attack. Or I was doing well and I got this sickness and everything collapsed. And when you look in history, and when you look at hundreds of stories, you see that in 99% of the cases, this is not the right explanation. We tend to think, as human beings, we tend to be very much causality-oriented, and we say, okay, A, B, C follows a certain sequence. But what history shows is that when people suffer this kind of major disruptions in their business or in their lives or in their career, the vulnerability was there for a very long time. It's not a single point event that gives you a heart attack or gives you a bankruptcy. It's a systematic vulnerability in the way you live, and the way you handle your finances. And this is proven, I think, by history. And also, you see it also in history, in revolutions. It's always the same. You see one bunch of crazy people, they want to change the world, and they start doing terrorist attacks. They start to do assassination, because they think that if I remove this one person, history will change. And this is totally unrealistic. Human life and history, we move slowly. It's just that we don't see it. And when you get severely sick, it is because you made yourself vulnerable most of the time for decades, because you have a lifestyle, as I was saying before, it was unsustainable. So what you have to do to remove vulnerabilities and to try to do better, to make something that is sustainable from all points of view. I remember, for instance, one of the stories in the book was about the attempt to assassinate Lenin, the Russian revolutionists. They tried to kill him. Actually, he was shot 3 times because the woman who tried to kill him, she thought that he was not radical enough. Funny enough, Fanny Kaplan, who tried to assassinate Lenin, she bought a revolver and she shot him 3 times. And in the end, nothing happened, because Lenin survived and became even more radical. His successor, Stalin, became even more radical. So this kind of idea that you can't change history or you can't change your life by a single event usually backfires. You have to maintain a lifestyle or a business that is sustainable, and don't make yourself, don't fall prey to this idea of the single event that will change your life, because it's nonsense. It's absolute mythology.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, on this book that we're talking about, how long did it actually take you to do all the research on it before you actually started writing it?
Yeah, I work backwards, in the sense that I don't follow the normal process. The normal process, when you write a book, you look for advice. People will tell you, oh, you need a subject, then you do research, and then you put it together. And if you do that, it's super, super slow. I would not recommend to work like this. I work backwards. So what I do is I'm constantly reading books, magazines, blogs. I read all kind of stuff, and I make notes through the years. I've been doing this already for decades. So I have the material already before I start to write. So when I want to write the next book, I just go into my notes, and I have notes for decades, and then I put together the research very quickly. So the effort goes into the writing. I think if you try to research from scratch, you will go crazy. But you spend like 2 years doing research and then 2 years to organize everything, I think it's super inefficient. This is also another mythology, that you have to do things in a certain order. You have to do things in ways that are efficient, and the logical way of writing books is not the most efficient. I think you have to develop the stories as you go through your life, and then when you write, it flows naturally. Otherwise, it's so slow that this is why people take like 2 years to write the book, because they follow the process, which is, from my point of view, is not very effective.
Well, how about the people, though? I've had people on my show that will write a major book, like 300 and some pages, and they claim they did it in 2 weeks' time without any research. They just said it flowed, and then they wonder why it doesn't sell.
Well, it's not proportional to the time you invest, but I think this is realistic. I mean, you can write a book very quickly. As I did my first book, I wrote it in 1 month, but editing takes sometimes half a year, because the first draft, unless you are a genius, and I'm not certainly a genius myself, the first draft is going to be very sketchy, and then you read it and you're horrified, you're horrible writing, and then you have to rewrite. Sometimes I rewrite a book 5 times before it's actually good enough for polishing, and then you spend another month on polishing. So I think you should not be driven by these stories that you can run your business in 4 hours a month, and you can write a book in 2 hours, and you can do whatever in 3 hours. This is not. I think this is a very interesting PR trick, but in real life, come on, be realistic. If you want to become skilled in any profession, it's going to take you a learning curve. You have to go through it, and after a few years, you will become very good. But I've never met any genius who could do complex things within a few weeks. I think this is very unrealistic and makes people very frustrated, because they compare themselves to a story which is in the first place not real.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you can blame some of that, John, on the internet, and I hate to say it, Amazon. And there's other people on the internet that, hey, they promise you write a book, they'll have it published and back to you within a week. It gets these people psyched up, and I hate to say it, not everybody is capable of writing a book. Not everybody should write a book. And what happens is they get misled, they put their heart and soul and a lot of their financial resources in to get it self-published, but then they're clueless at what to do after that. And I see that so often. They don't realize, hey, if you write a book, you got to do what you're doing. You get on a show, you're promoting your book. You go to bookstores, be it big, small, do book signings, and tell me if I'm wrong. You're out there, like you said, about half the time after you write a book, you're out there, pushing the book. And if you don't do that, you just can't write a book and put it up on Amazon, for example, people, and expect it's going to be a big hit and it's going to sell out.
Yeah, but this is the sickness of our century. It's positive thinking. It's stupid in the sense of stupid positive thinking. And let me just give you quickly a story from the book, why we get this mentality. Because nowadays, it seems that every book you pick up about personal development, they tell you, you be positive, and you will make it. And unfortunately, it has become like a religion today that you have to be super positive and you always have to be cheerful and you have to, but it doesn't work like this. And the person who actually invented the positive thinking movement, who was Emile Coué, who was a pharmacist from the early 20th century, he came up with these ideas of positive thinking, but from a different angle. And as well as want to mention this shortly, because I go through the details in my book, when positive thinking works and when it doesn't. And Coué was a scientist. He was a pharmacist. He was running a small pharmacy in a town in France. and he was very ambitious.